The next speaker is a gentleman who is an assistant professor at Michigan State University, Department of Linguistics and Languages and African Studies. He received his doctorate from Temple University. His research deals with the connections of West African people with ancient Egypt. And his dissertation was on ancient Egyptians of origin of Yoruba of West Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the podium Dr. Abdul Salau.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the organizers of this event for inviting me to this forum. And also, I'd like to recognize Dr. Udo Yang, who was on my committee to give me my PhD at Temple. Thank you very much. I've been using the degree. It's been keeping my body and soul together. But basically, as you can see from the title of my presentation is historical, cultural, and linguistic basis for a federated state. There's been a lot of argument, and even when Dr. Chimakori just presented, he said that the people, all the different nationalities that in Nigeria were put together by the imperial forces. But this is the beauty of scholarship, you know. I beg to differ that it wasn't the imperial people that put us together, because they're too young and their history is only too recent for them to be putting us together. As everybody in here knows, life started in Africa. Humanity itself took the giant leap, you know, from walking on all four legs and decided to start walking on all the twos. That process started in Africa. And it started this way because there were 6 species of humanity that was born. 3 of them didn't have any capacity to leave Africa, but the other 3 did migrate to other parts of the world. Because of the climatic effects that was going on in different parts of the world. At that time, right now we're having a warming effect, but that time the climatic change that was going on was the cooling. There was a warm glaciation in Europe, and as a result of that, it's the same black man that became mutated and changed his color to become white. We know, I mean, I'm not saying anything that's radical, you know, and so we know that the black people in Nigeria and in Africa have always been on the African continent. But how did we get to Nigeria? And that's the thing that I needed. We needed to look at a long span of history to really understand ourselves and to really know what is really at stake, you know, because Nigeria is the most populous black country in the world. So how did we get to Nigeria? Archaeologists and also paleontologists have told, and historians that have worked on this have told us that there was some Aboriginal population that was present in West Africa in the idea of short people, you know, they were living the Aboriginal to West Africa, but there was other group that migrated, and my research had been able to prove that we did migrate from the Nile Valley and Sudan. And what I discovered in my research was that a lot of names of cities in Nigeria, they are actually ethnic names in southern Sudan. And I'll give you a brief example of them. How many of you know where Lokoja is? Yeah, Lokoja is an ethnic group in southern Sudan. Kuru. Have you ever heard of Kuru? And I'm using my memory because I was going to use the visuals, but unfortunately I didn't. There's no visuals here, so, and now I'm trained as a teacher, so I can wing it. And I've been working on this research for a long time, so I know most of the material in my head. So Kuru is the highest point in Nigeria, and Kuru is an ethnic name in southern Sudan. Kachia is another place. There's is the name of a town in Nigeria, but its ethnic names is ethnic groups. How many of you have heard of the Kuku? Kuku, does the word Kuku? Ukuku, you know? There's a place called Ukuku in the Yoruba area. There's Kuku in southern Sudan. And what about Udok? UDUK. Okay, you know Nok in Kaduna State. There's Anwak in southern Sudan. So on and on. You know, in the absence of historical data, there's ways to do research. Names in Africa, they're not arbitrary. And also names of towns and places, they are not arbitrary. Because people, you can see the example of it in, there was a time that the Dutch came to what is known today as New York, and they named it New Amsterdam. The Amsterdam making reference to where they came from in Netherlands, so they called it New Amsterdam. And the English came, they changed the name and called it New York, referencing York that was in England. So the same thing with African groups. When they migrated to Nigeria, they came, all the different people that came from different parts of southern Sudan, moved and migrated and named the areas where they were living as they put the ethnic names of where they came from in their new place of abode. So that's one. Then there's other ways that historians try to find out how the relationship between people. We see that this notion of ethnicity is something that's causing a lot of problem for us in Nigeria, and this is where the historians and linguists can make some contribution. What we consider as ethnic groups in Nigeria is a fiction of our imagination, because the way human beings interact is not mutually exclusive. So say I say I'm Igbo, for example, what does that mean? If I say I'm Yoruba, what does that mean? If I say I'm Hausa, what does that mean? Does that mean that Hausa, what's the relationship between Hausa, Yoruba, Hausa and Edo? What's the relationship between Hausa and Ikwere in the Delta? What's the relationship between Urobo and Hausa? All of these things is what, how do you find this sort of relationship? Is easy. The thing is, like I told you, that black people that live in Nigeria have been living there for a long time. And I've been able to tell you that there was migration. We have evidence that there was migration from the Sudan. So what happens is that when you look at languages, just like you have people, they have father and mother. Languages have mother and father too. So the language we speak came from a very long tradition from ancient Egypt. So what, and the method they were using in trying to show the relationship between people and languages is the same method that was used by Europeans when they were trying to understand their relationship with India. So when they got to India, they saw that the Sanskrit language was related to Greek and to Latin. So they started to analyze the language. And when they did the analysis and they started comparing these languages, they started seeing similarities between these languages and as a result of that, they were able to create a language family that's called Indo-European. And linguists such as Obenga and Theophile Obenga have done research comparing ancient Egyptian languages with modern African languages, and they saw that there's similarities. And I'm going to beg your indulgence. I'll start by dealing with numbers. And in Egyptian, how do you say one in your language? Can anybody tell me how you say one?
Ofu in the language.
Ofu, eh?
Ofu, ofu.
OTU, okay. Anybody? Kenny?
Yes.
Okay.
Ofu. Ofu, yes.
Ofu, okay. Anyone? K. Okay. Again. Again. Okay. One. The word in Egyptian language with the numbers, there is very slippery. But I'll just tell you some of the Nigerian languages that have been able to keep their number one. In the French area, Yoruba is called Nago. The word for one in ancient Egyptian is wo, W-O, or W-A. And in the Nago area, which is Benin, they call it Owa. In Edo, any Edo speaker here? How do you say one? Opa. Okay. What about wo?
Owa, we say Owa.
Owa.
Owa means house.
House. Okay. Wallet is when. Nupe. In Nupe, is there any Nupe speaker? In Nupe is Owa. So, but in Yoruba is the notion of which one. Ewo. You know, if you say which one. Ewo, you know, so that's the word for one. And now, let's try number two. Anybody? The word for two in Egyptian is S-N-W. Maybe you write it down. S-N-W. Yeah. Shenu. So, like, and in Coptic is Shenu also. If you just have S in the initial position, we'll take that and run with it. Anybody that has in their language, they have the name, that has the word two starting with S? No. So that's not very common. Okay, now let's continue. For number three is HMT. How do you say three in your language? Taro. Okay, you see, T is there. Ato, yeah. Ibo. Ita, you see? T is there. What happened is that the different languages, one language will retain the one consonant, and the other language will retain other consonant. So you have HMT, meaning, so Yoruba retain, drop the H and has MT, which is meta. Some other people just drop the H and M, they only have T. So Igbo drop the H and M, so you have Ato. So these are the ways that the languages evolve. So, so you have Ato in Igbo, in Efik, you have Eta, and who also has another word that they can contribute to us? Terre, you see? So you see the HMT, so this is how our languages evolve and have different, the way they became the way they are. Okay, what about number four? Anybody? Four? Ene? Okay. In Egyptian is FDW. It's only Hausa that has it perfect. It's Fudu? Ine? Inam. Anybody? Nene? Nay. Okay. So you see, moving right along, we have the, what about number 5? When we get to the kinship terms, you see that one doesn't change. The numbers do change. But the kinship term, you don't borrow word for your mother. You're not going to borrow word for that, because we didn't make airplane in modern times, so we can borrow the word for airplane for computers. But our languages are not rich or poor that they borrow word for kinship terms. So when we get to kinship term, we'll have a lot of interaction. What about number 6? The word I'm looking for is one that starts with S.
Sonio.
Oh, Isi?
Sonio.
Sonio? Okay. Esa, okay. Okay, so you see, when you see all the languages, when we do this thing, we see that there's a lot of commonalities. I'm going to just move forward to the kinship terms because the numbers, they're very funny. It changes, the numbers, you borrow, a lot of languages borrow numbers. So, but now let's deal with the word for mother. This is what is important. And then when there's change, the linguists will have to explain why they change. And basically what they do is we know how words change, consonant, they change. So the word for mother in Egyptian is MWT. And that T is a feminine marker. So if you have Ma, Meu, or N, because M changes to N. So we have, like in some of our Nigerian language, Mama, we have Na, we have Enna, yeah, Inne, the M changes to N, it's nasal, so it changes to N. So this is how all these languages, the name for the, over time, these words continue, and they want me to wind up. So basically, that's the issue is that, first of all, we had this history, and that after we had this history, you already know the history of Nigeria, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But the issue, what I want to try to impress on you is that we're not just coming to the wall empty-handed, culturally. And we have to be very mindful when we're designing institutions. We're talking about elections here, but we're neglecting 50% of the Nigerian population, which is the women. Traditionally, in Africa, there's a male parliament and there's a female parliament. In the discussion of our modern politics, we're just copying the West blindly, and we need to really think about the cultural norms and look at some of the ways that things have been done in the culture. Not talking about the colonial and religious imposition from the Semitic and also from the West. Then we have to know that there's a lot of people that were taken from Nigeria during the period of transatlantic slave trade. And as I was preparing for this, I was struck by the way Nigerians represented themselves during this transatlantic Mahafa, which is Holocaust, on the French slave ship called the Redo, which has left Bonny, and Bonny is still in the present, Bonny town, is in the present part of Nigeria on the Guinea coast. The ship had been at sea for several days. There was a sudden commotion. The Africans began charging across the decks in every direction, eluding the flaming arm of the crew, avoiding the nettings. They hauled themselves into the ocean An eyewitness later wrote, the Negroes who had gotten off continued dancing about the wave, yelling with their might what seemed to me a song of triumph. And they were soon joined by several of their companions still on the deck. Our ship speedily left the ignorant creatures behind. Their voices came fainter, fainter, and then the sea was without a spot, and the air without a sound. On another ship, the captain declared, typically, you will fight the epidemic of suicide among the Igbos on board by public beheading of all the who attempted it. At one of these wild rituals, several Africans tried again to break loose and leap overboard. One succeeded. A crew member was lowered to catch him, but the man swam and floated away. He made signs which words cannot express, testifying to his happiness in escaping. And he went down, he was not seen no more. So you see, the slaveholder was saying that this was a cowardly act. Anybody that has ever fasted before know what it takes to commit suicide, rather than be enslaved. The people committed suicide. And there's been several millions of Nigerians that's been dispersed all over this North America, South America. They all have Brazil. They all have an interest in what happens to Nigeria. If Nigeria does well, they're going to feel very proud. So our elites and our political leaders have a great responsibility in thinking about the millions that perished on the coast before they left Africa, the millions that perished on the slave ship, and the ones that fought. We also understand that during the Haitian Revolution, one of the first successful revolution in history, in which captives, enslaved people overthrew their slave masters and gained their freedom in 1804. And we saw what just happened to Aristide when they were trying to celebrate the bicentennial of their revolution. He was deported to Africa. So what is going on in Nigeria has some kind of parallel to the things going on in Haiti. How can a country that liberated itself in 1804 is still going through the trauma that is going through today? So I implore you to just understand that Nigerians, as a culture, we're one, and nobody put us together. It wasn't Imperial Britain that put us together. It's not logical for people to be living next to someone that is their enemy. If you have someone living close to you, that means in history, at one point, there's some kind of relationship. So I'd like to end with that note, and I'd like to thank you for your deliberation on these matters.